All right, so with this video, I'm going to walk you through carving your hook. The first thing you're going to do is look at your piece of wood and find an area about an inch down and from the end and draw a smiley face. And this smiley face is where you're going to start to carve your hook. It's important not to draw that smiley face too close to the top, or else your crochet hook might be sort of weak. So no less than a half an inch down from the top. And now what I'm doing with my knife and a nice sharp blade is I'm actually pushing it down into the smiley face that I just drew. I'm kind of carving into it, pushing down, carving in, and what I've made is sort of like a barrier. Kind of, we can think about it as like a moat. And as I'm making my first cuts into the wood, the blade will stop there, and then it prevents me from cutting the top of my hook off. Now, you're going to need to keep going back and cutting into that smiley face along that line you've drawn to keep creating that protective moat so that you don't cut through the top of your hook. So that's just going to be a back and forth process. Recutting that line and then carving towards it carefully. Now, you'll notice here how I'm working. I'm actually pushing with my thumb and almost resisting that pressure with the tool. It's not like peeling a carrot. It's a very controlled process. You want to take off also as little as you can with each movement. It'll make it easier. Don't try to take off too much wood or you'll end up in trouble. Take off little pieces and it's a lot easier to get things done. It can get a little tricky, but just take your time and take off little pieces and you'll be fine. Just make sure to keep carving around that smiley face. That is really, really important because you don't want to do all this carving and then suddenly slice the top of your hook off. That would be pretty sad. So keep that smiley face on your hook. So now I'm starting to actually carve lower into and then upper. You're going to end up carving the entire hook. If you notice, when I cut into the smiley face, I'm kind of just doing 3 movements, and that's enough. And now I'm carving around a little bit, so to make the head a little bit smoother. You want the yarn to be able to slip off. You don't want there to be too much resistance. But see, I'm taking off very little at a time. I'm slowly carving away. I've sped up the process in this video, which will become pretty apparent eventually. Now I'm actually carving the very top because I want that to be rounded as well. It'll make it easier for the yarn to come on and off. It'll also make the crochet hook nicer to handle and nicer to look at. And I'm taking off very little and I'm spinning the hook around. See, across, up into the corner, across, up into the corner. Now here it's sped up a little bit. But that just shows you that eventually all those little cuts do make a difference. You'll start carving up and into that hook. You actually want a little bit of an overhang. You want a hook, not just an indentation. Now I'm actually using a piece of walnut dowel, which walnut is from the walnut tree, and that is a little bit harder wood than you have. I believe that what you have is probably birch, so you'll have an easier time, I'm sure. Now I'm carving further away from my hook now because I'm trying to shape it so that it's a little easier and more pleasant for my hand to work with it. But I'm going back and forth, looking at it, seeing if I like the way it looks. That looks pretty good. It's not bad. It's a good start. But I'm not done. Keep going. Always going back in and cutting down and then carving towards the cut. Working further away, working closer to the hook, further away, back and forth, till I start to get a shape that I like. Now I can even carve the other end of the handle. Here I can actually be a little bit more creative, carving the whole handle. Now be careful when you're carving the whole handle that you don't get carried away. If you hit a knot or if you hit something, an area where the wood grain turns around, you can get into trouble and take off more material than you'd like. I actually had to start over on a hook because that happened. Now you'll be handling this whole hook, so you want to make sure it's a nice smooth shape. But you don't have to go overboard because you do want to get to your crochet. So here I was actually sharpening the end a little bit, the opposite end of the hook, because I thought at sometimes I might use that as a tool to sort of get into some of the loops in my chain if necessary. You guys don't really need to do that if you don't want. It's easy to get into it though and keep carving until you've almost got a toothpick, so don't do that. Just working on the shape, trying to even it out. I think this one's about done. Except now I'm going to grab my sandpaper because I need to smooth it out. Believe it or not, it has some. So smoothing out the hook. This is actually my bigger piece of dowel, which is actually the hook that I'm using because I think I don't know, I'm just finding it more appropriate with the t-shirt yarn to use the big dowel, but you can use both. Which dowel you use really depends on how thick your yarn is, how thick you've cut your t-shirt. But you can experiment and figure out what works best for you. So I'm going back into my big hook. Big hook's a little bit more fun to carve too because there's just more going on. And I'm really trying to get deeper into, see how I'm going inside of the hook. And then I'm using the sandpaper to go even deeper and smoothing it out. The hook area needs to be pretty smooth so that the yarn doesn't get caught. Oh, I'm really working now. I must have had really good coffee this morning. All right. So my whole process took, I would say, about 25 minutes. And then you'll be ready to start crocheting with a crochet hook. All right.